who can't make it or who would rather not be in a room where there's chanting and things like that, you can still join in at home. Okay, so here we are, Sangha night. Great to see you all. Lovely to see everybody in their summer clothes, actually. Maybe our last chance to do that. But yeah, really great to see you all. And great that you've come on such a beautiful evening as well. So the theme we're in is called The Great Way. So really what that's about is how to be a Bodhisattva. So a Bodhisattva is a being who is absolutely intent on enlightenment, not just for themselves, but for all beings. So a bit of a kind of bonkers project that somehow you know, somehow bring all beings with you to enlightenment. But that's why I love it. I just love this completely huge and absurd idea that goes beyond what one individual can do, something that's so immense. So the great way, how to become a Bodhisattva. And there's lots of ways we can do that, loads of ways we can practice. And we're bringing together two ways of that in this theme. One is we've been looking at the five Buddhas of the Buddha Mandala. And they embody qualities of enlightenment. So different aspects of enlightenment are expressed in each of those figures. So you'll probably remember that if you've been able to come to Sangha night, that we've had Amitabha, a red Buddha, we've had Ratnasambhava, a golden Buddha, and now we're on Amoghasiddhi, who is a green Buddha, and I'm going to say a little bit more about him. So we've been getting in touch with, connecting with these qualities of enlightenment expressed in quite a kind of magical way through these figures that are made of light. And then we've also been looking at 6 qualities, 6 paramitas, 6 ways to the beyond, which are qualities we want to develop on the path of becoming a bodhisattva. So those include things like forbearance, the deep calm of meditation, and generosity. So last week we heard from Vajras about Amoghasiddhi, this green Buddha, this mysterious green Buddha of the midnight hour, of the north of pine forests. I kind of associate him with places like the north of Scotland or Norway, places like that. His name means unstoppable success. So should we have a picture of Amoghasiddhi? So there he is. Yeah, he's a green Buddha. He's you can see behind him, there are sort of pine forests, lots of stars, the sense of midnight. So he is traditionally associated with some creatures called the Shangshan Birds, or Garudas sometimes. They're a type of Garuda. And the Shangshan Birds are these amazing creatures that are half human, half bird. And Amoghasiddhi charges about the sky at night, being carried on a chariot, carried by these figures. So you can get a sense, I think they're in the front. Oh, yeah. So there's one. You can see that one's got wings. So half human, half bird, and a real sense of energy. So I kind of imagine at nighttime, you kind of be in the pine forest and you'd hear this whoosh, and there'd be a Amoghasiddhi being flown about with the Shangshan birds. So there's an energy there, an energy. So each of these Buddhas that we've been talking have a particular mudra or hand symbol. And the mudra of Amoghasiddhi is this one, like you've seen this figure at the back here as well, but this is the mudra of fearlessness. It tells us there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to fear. And last week we heard really beautifully from Vajras about fearlessness and where fearlessness can come from. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that talk, I'd really recommend it. So Amoghasiddhi is the Buddha of unstoppable success. That's his wisdom, unstoppable success. And associated with him is this paramita, this characteristic of Virya. So Virya is energy in pursuit of the spiritual life, or energy in pursuit of good. So this is energy that we're putting into for the ultimate benefit of all beings. So energy that's overcoming ignorance, neurotic craving, aversion. Energy that's overcoming that way of living your life, which is about you being pulled about by I want this, I don't want this, don't really know what's going on, that kind of confused lifestyle. It's about an energy that has taken us beyond that. And at the kind of the ultimate aim, I guess, or at the end of the spiritual path. That's the wrong phrase, because the spiritual life, I think, never comes to an end. But a stage, right at a very advanced stage, is spontaneous, compassionate action. So this is the way that a bodhisattva lives, just spontaneously doing what needs to be done. So without the blocks, the limits, those kind of inner tensions that we all feel that stop us from just meeting what's needed in the moment. And actually, some people might be thinking, oh, that sounds like this kind of spontaneous compassion. What about me if I was living in that situation? How would that be? And of course, the Bodhisattva would no longer have that difference between the self and other. So they wouldn't be thinking, what about me? If they were suffering, if their body needed rest, they would make sure their body had rest. So there's something about, they'd have gone beyond that kind of thing about needing to look after themselves. They'd just be aware of this, this flow of phenomenon of which their experience is part of. So a level of free-flowing energy. That's what the Bodhisattva experiences, where everything feels like play. Everything is play. And the traditional image is like an elephant diving into lotus ponds. And quite a few people, I think, today have been doing a bit of swimming outside, from what I hear. And I just have a beautiful sense of just playing in the water, that wonderful sense. But if you're an elephant, I think you just really jump in and make a lot of splash, really love it. And you go from pond to pond, just really enjoying yourself. So the Bodhisattva, it's not a life of a grim determination. It's a life of great joy, great pleasure of playing. And but what might that feel like? It's kind of good to try and get your head around what might that feel like. So I've just got a reading from Sangha, who's the founder of the Triratna Buddhist movement, from this book called Living with Awareness, which I would really recommend. Particularly if you haven't read any Sangha books before. It's a particularly kind of, well, it's quite funny in it and light, and it's all about mindfulness. So it's a great book. Anyway, there's a paragraph from this where he says, it might be good to imagine a day of unfettered inspiration and free-flowing energy. A day in which you're able to be completely true and clear in your communication. A day in which you felt so real a connection with others that your own concerns ceased to loom so balefully over your life. A day in which you never felt as though you were banging your head against a brick wall or getting stuck in a rut. Imagine such a day of creative freedom, and then imagine that freedom doubled or trebled and continuing to expand, and you will start to get an idea of the nature of enlightenment. So I think that is the kind of energy that I'm talking about, very free flowing. And you could imagine yourself now as you're sitting here, what would it be like just to have that flow of energy? And then when we go to the groups, what would that be like if you were just able to meet what's happening, communicate, have a cup of tea in this way when we do our meditation, do it. So just really have a sense of that, and maybe notice what comes up to stop the flow of energy. What blocks your flow of energy? Often it's over concern with ourselves, a kind of a selfing that comes up, a kind of thinking, oh, am I all right? Comparing ourselves with other people, or whatever it might be. That's often what blocks that energy, when we could just be in a free flow of energy, part of the world. So not all energy is Virya, because there can be a lot of energy in pursuit of the not good, of the what's not helpful. There's a Tibetan teacher called Gampopa, and he really clearly says that actually, if you're spending a lot of energy on business and a lot of energy on trying to subdue your enemies, so maybe a kind of political kind of way of living, well, you know, you're doing stuff from morning to night, that's actually that's laziness. That kind of energy, spending all that time doing all that stuff is laziness, because it's not what's going to lead to your growth and the growth of others. And I think, you know, in our culture, it can be almost be a bit of a badge. You know, someone will go, how are you? And go, oh, busy. You know, it's kind of like to be a really good thing. It's like, oh yeah, very busy. And it can be like a badge that you're okay as well, that your life is okay because it's very busy. But I think quite often what I realize that I'm doing when I'm filling my life up is partly craving, actually. It's craving for experience, but it's also a way of dealing with suffering. It's a way of dealing with the dukkha. And it might be suffering that's very powerful, you know, the suffering of grief, of fear, or it might be the existential sort of unsatisfactoriness of life. So that I can distract myself if I'm really busy from when I get up in the morning till when I go to bed, I can just distract myself. And that's one way we can distract ourselves from dukkha. The other is we'll find out, the other way we can deal with dukkha, is we will feel overwhelmed. So we might feel depressed, a lack of energy, we feel down and flat. So it's like we might either be distracting ourselves, or we might be finding ourselves just feeling really lacking in energy. So Virya, this energy might not look like someone's doing a lot of stuff, actually. For instance, it might be a really thing full of Virya to go and just spend 3 months up a mountain in Spain, not doing very much apart from sitting on your bum, meditating a lot. That might be a very full of Virya thing. Even though you're not adding to the gross domestic product or anything like that, you're actually, you will be working on yourself, and that will be of benefit to yourself and other people. And a person might look quite quiet and like they're not actually full of energy, but they do have this Virya, this wishing to benefit all beings. And I think Virya, we can say, is this energy that it has when we live from a different place. We're not running away from things. We're not trying to distract ourselves or being overwhelmed, but we're in tune with the flow of phenomena, which arises and it passes away. And there's just a flow of energy and nothing getting in the way. But I think, to have that level of ease and energy just flowing, well, actually it takes quite a lot of energy over a lot of years to put in the work so that does happen. And Virya is related to our just normal level of energy, our general level of energy. If we have no energy, if we do feel really flat and down, we just won't have any Virya. So developing energy of any sort is a real help. And to develop Virya, we need to break through those emotional and those psychological blocks that thwart our energy, that get in the way of our energy. So in previous talks, people will have talked about Shantideva. He's a medieval monk who wrote an incredible book called the Bodhicharya Avatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's path. And he gives lots of useful advice on how to develop Virya. It's a great chapter on Virya. He talks about 6 different things, 6 different ways that we can develop Virya, which I'm just going to talk about 2 today. So the first one is skillful pride, and the other is the desire for the skillful. So skillful pride. So pride is not normally seen as skillful. And that's because normally it's about conceit. It's like I'm better than or I'm worse than somebody else. So actually it's really quite a big form of selfing, isn't it? It's all about me. It's like, where am I in the hierarchy? Am I better than people, or am I less than people? Or even am I the same as people, actually? So that's not normally helpful. But actually, what Shantideva does quite a lot is he will take the energy that is behind some of these unskillful emotions like pride, and he uses them to help us. So having skillful pride is a way that we can overcome the way that our own self-contempt, as he calls it, and despondency can block our Virya. So it's an antidote. Virya has been an antidote to the self-contempt, as he calls it, of thinking, I can't do this, I can't change, I can't make progress, I can't become enlightened. Because the Buddha is clear that all beings have the potential to become enlightened. Even gnats, mosquitoes, and worms can do it, presumably given quite a lot of time, but even they can do it. So we can do it. But yeah, it's quite common, I think, to feel like you're so uniquely awful that you're the only being that can't. And I guess, like if enlightenment seems a long way off, there's something about, well, actually, can I become, slowly kinder, more open, more aware, more connected to other people, and actually have more energy as well? So there's something about why would I be the only person on whom the Dharma didn't work, on whom the laws of karma didn't work? So so that kind of level of thinking is really self-defeating, actually, because it's a bit like anything, isn't it? You think, oh, then I'm not going to bother. I can't do it. Why bother? And if you don't bother, definitely nothing's going to happen. Yeah. I always used to think, like years ago when I was kind of thinking about, I don't really know about, the Buddhist path, and I would compare people I knew in my work at that time who were getting old and people here at the Buddhist Central practicing Buddhists. And actually I used to think, wow, there's something about the people who've been practicing, the way that they're dealing with the the difficulties of old age, that I just find really inspiring. So even if nothing else is true, hopefully practicing will help me as I get older. So I think there's something about, it's looking for what you can see, what works for you. So I thought I'd just tell the quick story, which some of you will know, of Angulimala, who you would have thought was so awful that he couldn't get enlightened. So the story goes that it's the time of the Buddha, and one day after his meal, he leaves where he's been staying and he goes for a walk into a great forest. And he's walking down the path towards the forest, and all these people come running towards him and they go, don't go in the forest, don't go there. There's a serial killer in the forest called Angulimala, and he's really dangerous. He's killed 99 people already, and he just needs to kill one more person to make it the 100 that he's aiming for. So what Angulimala was doing was he was collecting fingers and thumbs from people, I suppose, and he was trying to get 1,000 of them. So that meant that he had to kill, if I got the maths right, anyway, he had to kill 100 people to do that. I don't think people willingly gave their fingers and thumbs up to him. And no one's quite sure why he was doing it. There's a kind of theory that perhaps it's because a professor where he was studying had said to him, if you come back with 1,000 thumbs and fingers, then I'll let you graduate. But presumably the professor never thought he'd really do it. But he obviously a very literal person, Angulimala, and he set off and he killed a lot of people. So he was called Angulimala, which means, mala means garland, and anguli is fingers. So he was called finger necklace because he had all these horrible rotting fingers around his neck. So the Buddha carried on, even though all the people were begging him not to go. And as the Buddha was walking along, he saw this figure coming towards him, and Angulimala must have thought, well, this is my day, isn't it? Look at this monk. He's old, he's not going to be able to put up a fight against me. I'm going to get my 100 sets of fingers and thumbs. So he rushed out to murder the Buddha and to complete his set. But what happened was very strange, because Angulimala was running after the Buddha, but the Buddha was just walking really slowly, really unhurried, very serene on the forest path. And Angulimala, he was a strong man, a good runner. He was running, but he couldn't catch up with him. So eventually he was really exhausted, angry, frustrated, and he screamed at the Buddha to stop. But the Buddha turned, and without any anger or any fear, he just quietly and directly said to Angulimala that the Buddha had already stopped. He had stopped killing and harming, and now it was time for Angulimala himself to do the same. So Angulimala was so struck by these words and by the example of the Buddha that he did stop. He threw away his weapons and followed the Buddha back to the monastery, where he became a monk. Now, it took quite a long time because he had quite a lot to clear, having done all that harm to people. And of course, the people whose relatives he'd murdered did not feel kindly towards him. But after some period, he did eventually purge his mind of the greed and the hatred and delusion, and did realize enlightenment. So anybody can become enlightened, even a serial killer like Angulimala. So there is no reason why we can't as well. I also think this is a fantastic example of Virya, actually, from the Buddha. It's like just knowing exactly the right thing to do. Like the Buddha didn't break into a sweat, he just walked really calmly, but he had a huge amount of energy that he directed in a completely appropriate way. Okay, so we might not be able to be like the Buddha. So Shantideva advises us to develop the habit of achieving our goals. So maybe starting with really small things that we know we can succeed at. Because he says it's not very good for us if we give up a project halfway through. Because otherwise you might be setting up a habit of giving up and failing. So basically, think carefully before you take anything on. And if you can, follow it through as well as you can. And I think that reminds me a little bit of Maitreyi Bandhu writes in his book, The Journey and the Guide. He writes a lot about self-mastery, which really struck me. It's about, in the first chapter, what do? It's like you work out how to just have a little bit of You'll feel good about yourself because you have done a few things, like you've tidied your room, if that's a thing for you, and you've paid the bill, and you've mended the puncture on your bike, or whatever it is. It's just like a sense that you can achieve in things, which is obviously the first step if you're going towards this kind of very, this unstoppable success of Amoghasiddhi, even in small steps. And actually, we may come across difficulties if we take something on, we take a task on. It might not be easy. There will be difficulties quite often, and that will require courage. So then we might need to invoke Amoghasiddhi with his gesture of granting fearlessness to help us through the difficulties of life. If we feel overwhelmed with fear that we can't do something, we can call on Amoghasiddhi. And we can use skillful pride. We can think, well, if you think of yourself as a Buddhist, you can think, I'm a Buddhist now. If you're kind of like find yourself in a place where you might be about to do something unethical, you could think, I'm a Buddhist now, and I don't want to let down myself, and I don't want to let down the other Buddhists as well, and I don't want to let down the Buddha. So I'm not going to carry on with this unethical thing. And you might not think of yourself as a Buddhist. You might just think of yourself as, but you've heard the teachings now, you've heard the precepts, and in a way, there's no going back. In a way, it's like, now there's something about just having that skillful pride. There's a phrase about being in the family of the Buddha and not letting that family down. So that's skillful pride, some aspects of it. So moving on to desire for the skillful. So desire for the skillful. So there's a common sort of wrong view that Buddhism regards all desire as a bad thing. But the tradition distinguishes between two types of desire. So there's kama chandra, which is desire for worldly pleasures, for sense pleasures, really. So, the pleasures of the senses, food, sex, etc. And there's Dharma Chanda. So Chanda means desire. And this is desire for the higher, desire for the ideal, for the skillful, for the truly beautiful. But what is truly beautiful? And as humans, we are very much creatures of desire, and we only really mobilize our energy towards what we truly desire. When we feel we should do something, that word, I really should go running, I really should, whatever it is, we don't, it's really hard to do it. We go through the motions. But when we really want something, well, we'll do huge amounts to get it. So, I've seen people leave pretty good lives and move continents and not knowing anybody because they've fallen in love with somebody. Do you know what I mean? They've just like let go of a pretty good life and they've moved to the United States or Australia or something like that because of that really strong desire to be with their partner. People will go to huge lengths because they really want to run a marathon or do an ultra marathon or something like that. People put them through themselves a lot in order to do that, to climb a mountain. If people really want to do something, it is amazing what we can do, but we do really need to want to do it. There's that saying, isn't there, about a person's heart isn't in it. They're doing a job or whatever they're doing, and it's like, no, I don't think her heart or his heart, their heart is really in that. And I think that's so true. It's like if our heart isn't in it, it's going to be hard for us to do something. It's going to feel like it's hard work. And so there's something about how do we find, we might have an intellectual idea that we think it would be great to be more generous, to be kinder, to be more connected to people, but we find it really hard to put into practice. And that's because there's lots going on within us. So how do we just really find our way to get our heart into what we want to do? Well, I think the first step is to really imagine the goal, imagine what it might be like, which is why I love that paragraph that I read out to you from Sangha, because he's really giving me a sense of what it might be like in my ordinary life to have this flow of energy, this way of living. And if we can really feel how good it would be to achieve it, and actually also how bad it would be if we don't achieve it, that can be really, that gives us a lot of motivation. Our heart will be in what we're doing. And Shantideva uses this in the Bodhisattva. So he just really evokes the beauty and pleasure of higher states of consciousness, which he symbolizes by the idea of the Pure Land. So the Pure Land is where everything is beautiful, everything is conducive to enlightenment, to growth. And he also describes the suffering of falling into lower spiritual states. Now, he was like a medieval monk, so he uses like the traditional symbolism of a hell realm and some really horrible things of people suffering in hell. But we might not believe in hell, but there are mental states that we can fall into that are literally hellish. So we can think, if I don't practice, every day, in fact, for instance, if I'm trying to develop a meditation practice, I can think, well, the more that I meditate, I know, if this is your experience, that it makes me feel a little bit freer in the day. I have a little bit more energy. I'm a little bit more spacious. Then we think about that, and that will make us want to do it. And if we think, if I don't meditate, I remember that I get a bit more grumpy. I'm a little bit like to snap at somebody. Again, that's thinking about the negative side if we don't do it. So we can use our imagination to imagine, what is it like if we practice? And I think if we're going to really develop this Dharma Chandra, this desire, well, actually, we need to be able to know when we're enjoying something that is skillful. And you think that would be pretty easy, wouldn't you? But I think some of us, me, can sometimes find it difficult to allow myself to just really be happy and to just really enjoy something, actually. It's just something skillful, and to be joyful, just to be joyful, and just to really allow that to be in my experience. And I wonder why, but I think there's maybe some reasons which might be good to talk about in your groups. So we might feel some guilt. We might think, is it okay for me to be happy if other people are suffering? We might have fear that if we do have joy and happiness, it might be taken away from us. We might have the Protestant work ethic, even if we're not Protestant, but we might have that work ethic that we should be working really hard, particularly if we're Buddhist, we should be working really hard and not, at our meditation and all that, and not enjoying ourselves. And there may be other reasons as well. And of course, all of those are just a bit crazy, because it's a bit like, if my aim is for me to be happy and all beings to be happy, it's a bit weird that I'm not just allowing myself to be happy. It would be sensible to apply that to myself. And of course, it's, if somebody's in a ditch suffering and we want to do what we can to pull them out of the ditch, there's no point us getting in the ditch with them as well. We need to stay, on the ground so that we can pull them out. So, so I just think it's quite interesting to maybe explore that a little bit. Because I do think those simple pleasures, that happipiness, that joy in our lives will actually help us through being less caught up in addictive and neurotic behaviors. Because if we can just have a mindful, it's like if we are mindful in our lives, we can enjoy a beautiful summer's evening, really enjoy it, and we're less likely to be there then craving other things that aren't maybe so helpful to us. So I think it's important to know what we enjoy that's skillful, and particularly, what gives us the juice in our practice as Buddhists or as in people who come to the centre, and do more of that. If we get inspired by listening to talks online, have time for that. If meditation works for us, give ourselves enough time to meditate as well, actually. To go on retreat is a really important thing. Being with other people who practice, I find really enjoyable. A few weekends ago, I was able to go away for the first time for quite a long time on a weekend retreat with 200 other order members. And there was just such beautiful moments then. I'm not going to be able to describe them really well, but for instance, one where a woman called Virya who was leading a ritual, just exchanged glances with Vajras, who's someone who's been in the order a really long time. Both of them, I just really admire their practice such a lot. And the way they looked at each other, it just felt so beautiful. And it's like, I thought, I haven't had this for all this time. It's been like, stuff has been on Zoom and that's been fine. But to be there, to see that connection between those two practitioners, it's so beautiful. And there's something about, the more that we can give ourselves that experience, well, the more inspired we're going to be, the more virya we're going to have. Another way to do it can be meditating on a Buddha figure, actually. That's why these Buddha figures have developed. So, that might be the Amoghasiddhi, gives you that sense of fearlessness or that mystery of the midnight sky. And that by meditating on him, bringing him to mind, you're opening up to something bigger. Yes, also just like reconnecting with our inspiration, with our intention. So we will all have had inspiration and strong intentions at time. And I was doing a little bit of study, it was only yesterday, with the Virya team and the centre team here. And Emma actually said something that just really struck me. She said, if we can really connect with our intention, what we want to do, well, the energy will just flow. It will just flow. If we know why we're doing something, the energy will flow from that, and it will be quite simple. It's not complicated. However, quite often our desires are likely to be quite conflicting. So parts of us might think, yes, I'm really inspired by, that thing I was talking to you about, the two practitioners communicating. And part of us might be thinking, oh God, I wish this was over and I could go and get a coffee. It's just like those parts of us will be there all the time. And when our energies are in conflict, we can feel a lot of tension, and we often don't achieve very much. That feeling you get, you think, I don't know why is it that I haven't got round to doing that thing? And often it's because we've got a lot of conflicted energy about it, because we just do it if it was easy, but we have unconscious conflicts around it, which is why we don't do it. And this is another aspect of where the symbolism of Amoghasiddhi is really relevant. So he has the crossed Vajra. I don't know if you can see that. There's the crossed Vajra. Thank you. And this is a really powerful symbol of integration. So harmonizing energies that could be in conflict. And so it's a symbol of integration. And what do we mean by integration? So integration has different aspects. Basically, it's as much as possible bringing ourselves together. So all those different parts of us that have different aims, bringing them together. And that can both be vertically, so up and down. So it might be there are parts of us, so Padmasambhava, whose festival we're having soon, particularly connected with transforming what you might call demons. You might call those part of yourselves demons, and transforming them into something that we can use the energy of something powerful. But as well as those parts of ourselves that we don't like particularly, maybe our anger, strong craving, and transforming that, we will have experiences from the heights. We will have experience of beauty, of inspiration, and it's also integrating that into our experience. Many people have had really strong kind of spiritual experiences, but it never gets integrated into the rest of their life, and it just kind of fades away. So there's something about how we can integrate that into our life as well. So there's vertical, and then there's also just horizontal. It's just like all these kind of different things we want to do, all the different conditioning we've had really produces all these different selves, and they often really don't want to do the same things. And you can think there's a teacher called Vasantra who talks about like maybe having 100 selves, something like that. And some of those selves, they really just don't want to practice the Dharma. And we may never had a chat with them about them. We may never have asked them what they want to do. And, they're kind of thinking, what I really, really want to do is whatever it is. I can't even think what it is, but I really want to go and spend loads of money on buying myself a big pool for the garden. That's what I want. Yes, that's what I want. I want to have this very beautiful pool in the garden so I can go swimming every day. Okay, that's what I want to spend all my money on. And that means actually I have to go and get a job that gives me enough money to do that. So it's a bit like there's part of me that wants that. And it'll be going, what are you doing then, Satyajyoti? You're working at the Buddhist Center, you don't get a huge amount of money. You're never going to get that pool. Do you see what I mean? I mean, that's a really silly example. But we have lots of examples like that. And they're very strong, some of those. And if we don't talk to them, they will just carry on unconsciously sabotaging us, actually. So there's something about learning those parts of ourselves and integrating them. So so this Vajra, this diamond thunderbolt, is a powerful symbol. We can kind of hold a double Vajra. We can meditate on a double Vajra and imagining this coming together of these different parts of ourselves. And those Shangshan birds that I was talking about with all that energy flying through the sky, they're another symbol of integration because they're half bird, half human. And they symbolize, a bit like the centaur in Greek mythology or Roman mythology, they symbolize those deep animal energies that come together with a human aspect. So most of us will have been on a newcomer's course and we will have heard that image of the rider and the horse. So that we think we're the rider, that's the conscious part of us, and we think we're in charge of the horse, but actually the horse is heading home. It's heading to where there's like a really nice stable, some really attractive other horses, and it's not really, we're trying to ride it off, I don't know, into freedom somewhere, and it's got different ideas. And there's something about, we need to get that horse on our side. We need to get it wanting to go and gallop across the plains as well. So to have Virya, that's what we need, because otherwise we're just working against ourselves all the time. So I'll just finish with a few ways that we can do that. Well, ritual, actually. Ritual, mantra, images. This is the language of the depths. So this speaks to those unconscious part of ourselves and gets those energies going. And that can happen in art as well. It can happen in music, in film, in theatre. There's something about those, the language of the depths that can talk to us. And that's why we do ritual here. So if you are able to come to the Padmasambhava of the day online or in person, you will hear and see a lot of the kind of language of the depths. Meditation makes these deep energies more conscious. You might well have had the experience while you're meditating of things will come up and you think, oh gosh, I don't know where that came from, but things will come into your experience. And I think just meditating anyway is an integrating practice, even if we're not aware of it. It can actually be a way that our deep energies become more integrated. Making a commitment to do something, to a task that we're going to see through. You know, so that might be a commitment like, I don't know, becoming a mitra, becoming an order member, getting married, all sorts of commitments you might make in life, buying a house, I guess, taking on a job. There's all sorts of commitments that working at the Buddhist center that will force us to bring all our energies into awareness, because difficulties will get in the way and we'll realize that we're not the person we thought we were and that we can't quite do it in the way that we thought we could. So that can really force us to bring our energies into awareness. And having a higher purpose really helps. So you might also remember from the intermediate course, we talk about this image of in our depths, it's like there's this great medieval banqueting hall. And there are all these noble figures sitting around a dining table. They're kings, queens, magicians, wizards, high priestesses, all these kind of mythical figures. But they're all nodding away. They're covered with cobwebs and dust, and they're just like this. They're down in our depths. And every now and then one kind of wakes up and goes, oh, what's she up to now? What are they up to now? And goes, oh, boring, and kind of goes back to sleep. However, if we have a higher purpose, something that's quite mythical, something that's bigger than us, like the Bodhisattva ideal, well, it gives us a sense of those figures then have something that they can respect, something they can serve, and it wakes them up and they get on our side, and they can rise above their differences as well. It's a bit like they can serve something bigger. So Virya is about getting all our energies on our side, and if we can do that, we can be borne along as joyfully as Amoghasiddhi is carried along by his Shangshan Birds.